The graveyard of stars held one last saint. Captain Alara Vance watched the shattered star shell glitter on the main screen of the diplomatic cutter Steward. Each shard of the tessellation, some the size of moons, caught the light of the central, furiously blue sun. They were navigating a field of ghosts and broken dreams, a monument to an ambition that had outstripped its foundation. The Valtian compact salvage fleet was a pack of metal hyenas, and they were closing on the same scent that had brought the Steward to this forgotten edge of concordant space. The stakes were simple and absolute. If the Valtians reached the anomaly first, they would tear it apart under the guise of interstellar salvage law, selling a piece of human history for scrap. Her tactical officer Jax paced behind her command chair, the motion tight with impatience. "They're burning their drives hot, Captain. They mean to beat us. We can match them, but it will cost us fuel we don't have budgeted. We will maintain our current velocity," Lieutenant Vance said, her voice calm, a stark contrast to the thrum of anxiety in her chest. A faint structured hum had begun to register on the deep-range resonance sensors an hour ago. It was a signal so ancient and pure it felt less like a transmission and more like a memory. Kaylin, her xenolinguistics specialist, had isolated a ghost image from the energy signature. It was a perfect circle bisected by a single unwavering vertical line. An old symbol, one that resonated with the very foundation of their laws. It was a sigil of balance of judgment. The anomaly itself was a sleeping titan. Its power arrays were cold, utterly inert, yet they remained aligned with geometric perfection against the chaos of the debris field. Humanity had left its laws among the stars. Vance stared at the approaching Valtian signatures, their icons flashing a hungry, predatory red. She would not let them turn a sanctuary into a strip mine. This was not a salvage claim. It was a vigil. Logos, the ship's mind, spoke into her neural implant, its voice a cascade of pure synthetic logic. "Captain, my projections give the Valtian fleet an 81.4% probability of reaching the target coordinates first. Their lead vessel, the Gilded Claw, has a superior thrust-to-mass ratio." "Logos, I am aware of the physics," Vance replied, keeping her gaze fixed on the screen. "I am more concerned with the law. The law as written favors the first claimant on site." Logos countered without inflection. "Foreman Grin is a master of its exploitation. His methods are aggressive but legally sound within established precedent. Some ghosts refuse to be forgotten." Vance felt the hum from the anomaly shift, a subtle change in pitch that the ship's sensors barely registered, but which she felt deep in her bones. It was the sound of something impossibly old stirring in its sleep. She was the commander of a diplomatic vessel, a ship armed with treaties and sanctions, not torpedoes. Her very presence here was a gamble, an appeal to a higher authority than the raw calculus of speed and greed. She was betting that whatever was waiting in the dark remembered the spirit of the law, not just its brittle, faded text. "Kaylin, report," she ordered, her voice cutting through the low tension on the bridge. The lanky xenolinguist leaned over his console, his eyes wide with a scholar's fascination. "The signal's structure is immaculate, Captain. It's not a language. It's a proof. A mathematical assertion of existence wrapped in a legal query. The closest translation is a question." He paused, frowning as he tried to frame the concept. "It is asking, by what measure do you stand?" The calculus of greed was a simple equation. On the screen, the Valtian ships resolved into clearer shapes. Brutish functional haulers and escorts bristling with cutter beams and magnetic grapples. They were tools of deconstruction built to render history into ingot. The Steward, by contrast, was sleek and elegant, a vessel designed to build bridges, not tear them down. In the silent arena of the tessellation, it was a songbird facing a flock of vultures. Vance thought of the civilian outposts on the system's periphery, small communities huddled in the shadow of this great broken work. A recent vignette from a news feed flashed in her mind. A child on the dusty street of an asteroid colony pointing a toy ship at the glittering debris field. "The ghost is out there," the child had said to the reporter, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Mom says it sings when someone remembers the rules. The people here deserved more than to have their legends dismantled for profit. The laws of humanity were meant to build, not to break." Jack stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Captain, they're still accelerating. Grin is broadcasting his claim on an open channel citing the salvage mandate of 72. He's making it official." "Let him," Vance said softly. "He is staking a claim on a wreck. We are answering a summons." She felt a certainty crystallize within her, a conviction that transcended the cold data streaming from Logos. The sigil Kalen had found, the unwavering line through the perfect circle, it wasn't just a symbol, it was a promise that some accounts were never meant to be closed. She would see that promise honored. The steward glided through the final veil of shimmering dust, and the anomaly came into view. The bridge fell silent. Even Jack stopped his pacing. It was a ship, but that word felt inadequate, like calling a cathedral a building. It was immense, a monolith of obsidian-hued armor plating that seemed to drink the light of the nearby star. It was embedded in a shard of the Dyson sphere, a spear of crystal piercing its flank, yet the vessel itself was impossibly, unnervingly pristine. No micrometeorite scars, no radiation decay, no sign of the cataclysm that had shattered this system. And there, emblazoned on its prow, glowing with a soft internal luminescence, was the sigil. A circle of white light bisected by a line of absolute black. "By the Founders," Kalen whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "It's a Judicator-class vessel. I've only seen them in archives. They were from the Great Diaspora, the very first wave. A price is paid for all things." The Valtian fleet, led by the hulking Gilded Claw, dropped out of high burn, their engines flaring, as they took up positions around the ancient ship. Their forms were ugly and pragmatic against the sublime architecture of the relic. A transmission request blinked on Vance's console. She accepted. A holographic image of a man appeared, stout, with a florid face, and eyes that were small, shrewd, and devoid of warmth. "Foreman Grin, Captain Vance," he began, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone of false cordiality. "A pleasure to see the diplomatic corps taking an interest in local commerce. But you are late. As per the salvage mandate, my consortium has filed a primary claim on this derelict. We will begin survey and disassembly within the hour. There are ledgers that cannot be erased." Vance met his gaze without flinching. "Foreman Grin, this is not a derelict. It is an artifact of immense historical and cultural significance. We are designating it Xenoglyph 1 and placing it under the protection of the Concordance Heritage Act." Grin chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. "A lovely sentiment, Captain. But the Heritage Act requires evidence of function or sentience. Your own scans will confirm this vessel is cold. No power, no life signs, no response to any hailing frequency. We have tried. It is dead metal, and the law says it belongs to me." He was right, in the coldest sense. The ship was utterly silent. The hum they had tracked was now gone, as if the Titan was holding its breath. It sat inert, a prize waiting to be claimed. Yet Vance could not shake the feeling that it was watching them, judging them. The relic was not waiting for a signal. It was waiting for a precedent. "Foreman, I am issuing a formal diplomatic injunction." Vance stated her words sharp and clear. "You will stand down your salvage teams and await our full investigation. Any attempt to touch that vessel will be considered a violation of Concordance authority. Grin's smile tightened. An injunction requires a credible threat assessment. The only threat here, Captain, is to my profit margin. My surveyors will proceed. If you interfere, it will be your vessel, the Steward, that is in violation of the law. Do you truly wish for that? His image winked out, leaving a lingering silence on the bridge. The weight of a promise is measured by its keeper. Jax turned to her, his hands clenched into fists. He's calling our bluff. He knows we can't stop him by force. We have to do something. Vance turned her attention to Kaelin. The question it asked, she said, her mind racing. By what measure do you stand? It's not a riddle. It's a standard. We have to show it our standard. She looked at the image of Grin's fleet, their cutter drones already detaching from the gilded claw like metallic parasites. Logos open a system-wide broadcast. All channels unencrypted. Captain, the AI queried. Broadcasting our intentions will eliminate any remaining strategic ambiguity. That is the point, Vance said. Ambiguity is what men like Grin thrive on. We are going to bring the light. She leaned forward, her heart pounding a steady, resolute rhythm. She was a diplomat. Her words were her weapons, and she was about to fire a salvo that would be heard across the entire sector. Justice is a function of clarity. Vance's voice, calm and measured, echoed across the system. She did not speak to Grin, but to the silent listeners on distant outposts, to the Concordance monitors hundreds of light-years away, and to the ancient vessel before them. She outlined the situation with unwavering precision. She cited Grin's claim, then she cited the Heritage Act. She described the sigil on the ship's hull, explaining its historical context as a symbol of old Earth's highest courts of law. She was not making a plea. She was building a case. Foreman Grin operates under the assumption that this vessel is property. She broadcasted the words flowing with practiced ease. He is mistaken. A ship that bears the mark of the judiciary is not an object. It is a precedent. It is a question asked of every generation that finds it. And my government will not allow that question to be silenced by a cutting torch and a balance sheet. As she spoke, the Valtian surveyor drones swarmed toward the ancient ship. They were small, agile machines designed to slice through dormant hulls. On the steward's bridge, Jax watched their approach, his expression a mask of frustration. He could destroy them with a single volley from the ship's defensive cannons, but it would be an act of aggression. It would prove Grin's point and nullify their legal high ground instantly. His hands hovered over the fire controls, a silent war being waged within him. Some choices are made for you. Kaelin's console suddenly chimed a sharp, clear tone that cut through the tension. Captain, the energy signature, it's back. But it's different. On the main screen, the obsidian hull of the Judicator began to shimmer. Faint lines of light traced across its surface, forming intricate patterns that converged on the glowing sigil. The hum returned deeper now, resonating not just through sensors, but through the very hull of the steward. It was the sound of a giant awakening from a slumber of millennia. The drones are not proceeding. Logos reported its synthetic voice for the first time, edged with something akin to surprise. Their guidance systems are failing. They are caught in a localized resonance field. The drones tumbled in space, their thrusters firing erratically as they fought an enemy they couldn't see. The field emanating from the Judicator was not destructive. It was interrogative. It was flooding their simple machine minds with a cascade of logic puzzles, ethical paradoxes, and requests for legal standing. The drones designed for cutting metal were being defeated A lesson must be taught before it can be learned. A new light appeared on the ancient vessel's flank. It was not a weapon port, but a serene rectangular opening, a doorway beckoning from the void. A single pure tone broadcast from the ship, a sound that Kalen's computer instantly translated. It was not a word, but a concept. Worthy. Grin's voice, now stripped of its condescending calm, blasted over the comm. "What is this trickery, Vance? What have you done? I have done nothing." Foreman Vance replied, a slow smile touching her lips. "I simply answered a question. It appears my answer was found satisfactory." She rose from her command chair. "Jax, you have the bridge. Maintain our position. Do not under any circumstances power our weapons. Kalen, you're with me. Bring your translation kit. We have been granted an audience. A reckoning does not bargain." The shuttle ride across the gap between the steward and the judicator was silent. Vance watched the colossal ship grow until it filled the viewport, its scale humbling. The architecture was severe, almost brutalist, yet possessed an undeniable grace. It was a weapon, she had no doubt, but it was a weapon forged to serve an ideal. As they approached the glowing entryway, the shuttle's systems registered a breathable atmosphere and standard gravity within. The ancient ship was not just awake, it was waiting. They stepped out of the shuttle into a corridor that was vast and silent, carved from the same light-absorbing material as the hull. The air was cool, sterile, and carried a faint scent of ozone and cold metal. There were no decorations, no unnecessary flourishes. Every line, every angle served a purpose. The path was lit by soft glowing strips embedded in the floor, leading them deeper into the heart of the vessel. "The power readings are off the scale," Captain Kalen murmured, his tricorder working furiously. "But it's all contained, shielded. The efficiency is unlike anything I have ever seen. This ship is not just ancient, it is perfect." The corridor opened into a chamber that took Vance's breath away. It was not a bridge in the traditional sense. It was a hybrid of a courtroom, a library, and a celestial observatory. The ceiling was a dome of blackness that showed the tessellation outside, but with streams of data flowing over the starfield, highlighting orbital mechanics, energy potentials, and legal jurisdictions. The walls were lined with what looked like alcoves, each holding a silent, shimmering field of light. At the center of the room was a single raised platform, and on it a console of polished black stone displaying the glowing sigil of judgment. There is no statute of limitations on truth. As they approached, the console shimmered. Text began to flow across it, not in any known language, but in a pure mathematical script that Kalen's translator struggled to parse. An intelligence was communicating with them not through words, but through concepts. It identified itself without name or title, only by its function. It was a custodian of accounts, a keeper of the balance. Its designation was the Reckoning. It showed them its purpose. It was not a warship in the way humanity now understood them. It was an enforcer of treaties, a mobile court of last resort. Its primary function was not conquest, but the restoration of equilibrium. It did not conquer planets. It settled disputes. It did not take prisoners. It issued verdicts. Its archives were not records of battles won, but of debts paid and restitutions made. Then the console's display shifted. It focused on a single final entry in its vast ledger. The date stamp was from a time before the Concordance, before humanity had scattered to this arm of the galaxy. It was an unresolved case. The script flowed, forming images, data points, and damage assessments. It was the record of the crime that had murdered the Dyson sphere. The case was titled The Unbalanced Equation of the Sol Tessera System. The ship's AI, the ancient dispassionate mind within the machine, began to interface directly with Kalen's translator, its voice forming in their comms. It was a sound like grinding stone and pure light, a voice that had not spoken for 10,000 years. A debt is outstanding, it stated. The scales were broken. The ledger was left open. We were rendered dormant before the final count could be made. Outside, the situation was escalating. On the steward's bridge, Jax watched as the Valtian fleet began to move. They were not retreating. They were repositioning, forming a loose predatory cordon around his much smaller vessel. Foreman Grin's voice returned, laced with cold fury. "Captain Vance, you have boarded that vessel without my authority. You are interfering with a lawful salvage operation. I am now officially detaining your ship and crew for obstruction. Power down your drives and prepare to be boarded." Logos's voice was a whisper of doom in Jax's mind. "Tactical assessment. The steward is bracketed. The Valtian vessels have active weapon locks. Our shield integrity is insufficient to withstand a coordinated barrage. Probability of survival is 4.7%. The hunter's first instinct is to isolate its prey." Jax's hand rested on the tactical console. His orders were clear. Protect the mission. Protect his captain. But he was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and bound by rules of engagement that had just become a death sentence. To fight was suicide. To surrender was to fail. Inside the reckoning, the central console flared with crimson light. It displayed the tactical situation outside, showing the steward held in the Valtian crosshairs. It showed the weapon signatures of Grin's fleet, analyzing their power levels, their shield frequencies, their firing arcs. Then it showed Vance its own capabilities. Holographic schematics bloomed in the air around the console. They revealed weapon systems that defied modern physics. Lances of focused gravity. Torpedoes that could shift phase to bypass shields entirely. A defensive grid that could warp space-time itself. It was a level of power that could not just defeat Grin's fleet, but erase it from existence without a trace. The ancient voice spoke again, its tone unchanging, yet the weight of its offer was immense. An injustice is being perpetrated. An agent of a lawful order is threatened. We are empowered to act. Provide a directive. We will balance this equation. The machine remembers every crime. The offer hung in the silent chamber. The power to save her ship, her crew, and her mission was at her fingertips. All she had to do was give the order. One word and the vultures outside would become dust. Kalen looked at her, his face pale, his expression torn between fear and awe. It was the ultimate test. The ship was asking her to define justice not with words, but with fire. Vance looked at the schematics, at the terrifying, beautiful purity of the destruction being offered. It would be so easy, so simple. Grin had acted with aggression. He had threatened her crew. By any military standard, a lethal response was justified. But she was not a soldier. She was a diplomat. And her victory had to be a testament to her ideals, not a betrayal of them. To use this power for simple vengeance would make her no different from the tyrants this ship was built to judge. It would be an act of desecration. She turned to the console, placing her hand on its cool black surface. "You do not understand," she said, her voice quiet but firm, speaking as much to the ancient mind as to herself. "Justice is not about balancing the scales through annihilation. It is about building a foundation so that the scales are not broken again." She drew a deep breath. A plan audacious and perilous formed in her mind. It was a legal gambit of unprecedented scale, a move that would either establish a new precedent for the entire galaxy or see her disgraced and her crew lost. There will be no violence, she commanded. Through the console, she accessed the ship's external communication systems, their power and clarity dwarfing those of the steward. She bypassed Grin entirely, opening a channel to the entire sector, to every listening post and every colony and every concordance authority. Her voice, amplified by the power of the ancient saintship, became a proclamation. This is Captain Alara Vance acting under the authority of the Concordance Diplomatic Corps, she announced, her words ringing with newfound power. The vessel designated Xenoglyph 1, the ancient ship, the Reckoning, is hereby declared a protected galactic heritage site. Furthermore, as its last commanding authority, it is reactivating its primary function. Its final unresolved case, the inquiry into the destruction of the tessellation Dyson sphere, is now an active and open investigation. As the ranking Concordance official on site, I am deputizing this vessel and its custodian AI as an official agent of this inquiry. All vessels in this system are now subject to its legal authority. A law is only as strong as its enforcer. Foreman Grin's laughter, a harsh grating sound, filled the bridge of the steward. Deputizing a wreck, Captain, your desperation is unbecoming. That is the most ludicrous legal fiction I have ever heard. You have no authority, no jurisdiction, and you are out of time. My patience is at an end. Fire a warning shot across her bow, he commanded his fleet. Disable her engines. Jax's knuckles were white on the console. Captain, they're locking weapons. They're going to fire inside the Reckoning. The tactical display shifted. It highlighted the incoming energy signatures, calculating their trajectory and yield. The ancient ship's voice spoke, its tone as flat as a judicial ruling. A hostile act is imminent. A countermeasure is required. We recommend a localized gravitational distortion to disassemble the offending vessel. No, Vance, said, her voice a command that echoed with the authority she had just claimed. You will not destroy them. You will audit them. She pointed at the schematic of the Gilded Claw. You are a keeper of accounts. Foreman Grin operates a business. He is a public consortium. His ledgers, his salvage manifests his cargo records. They are all a matter of public record. Are they not? A new stream of data flooded the central console, flowing with impossible speed. Correct. The Valtian Compact is a signatory to the Interstellar Commerce Transparency Act. Their records are accessible. Then show him, Vance ordered, a fierce light in her eyes. Show him what a true accounting looks like. Turn his own laws back on him. The mirror of justice reflects all flaws. The warning shot from the Valtian cruiser flared a brilliant lance of plasma aimed at the steward's engines, but it never arrived. Halfway to its target, the bolt simply dissolved. It unraveled into a harmless cloud of incandescent particles, its energy dissipated by a flicker in space-time too brief for sensors to properly analyze. It was as if the universe itself had deemed the attack inadmissible. Then across the open channel that Grin had used to issue his threat, a new broadcast began. It was not a voice, but a stream of pure data displayed on every screen in the Valtian fleet. It was the complete, unredacted financial history of the Grin Salvage Consortium. Every contract, every bribe, every safety violation that had been paid to disappear. The records showed how Grin had systematically undervalued artifacts, declaring them scrap to avoid heritage taxes. It showed the shell corporations used to launder profits. It highlighted dozens of pending lawsuits from cheated partners and mistreated crews. It was a weaponization of truth delivered with the cold, irrefutable precision. On a freighter drifting near the system's edge, a grizzled captain watched the data stream scroll across his secondary monitor. He had been cheated by Grin years ago, a loss that had nearly bankrupted him. He looked at the evidence now laid bare for the entire sector to see, and a slow, grim smile spread across his face. "Payback," he muttered to his first mate. "The ghost is singing a song for him, all right. A song of numbers. The scales of justice have a weight of their own." Foreman Grin stared at his console, his florid face draining of all color. His entire criminal enterprise was being dismantled line by line in front of his eyes and the eyes of the galaxy. This was not an attack he could counter with shields or torpedoes. It was an assault on his very foundation, on the fiction of legitimacy he had so carefully constructed. "Cease this," he roared into the calm. "This is an illegal intrusion, a violation of my corporate privacy." Vance's amplified voice answered from the reckoning. "The law you stand upon requires transparency, Foreman. You are simply being held to the standard you profess to uphold." "This is not an attack. It is a compliance audit." The data stream did not stop. It delved deeper. It cross-referenced the consortium's shipping manifests with galactic commodity prices revealing massive systemic fraud. It analyzed the metallurgy of his salvaged materials, proving that alloys from protected historical sites had been melted down and sold as common-grade steel. Each new revelation was another nail in the coffin of his reputation. A debt must be named before it can be paid. Logos's calm voice spoke on the steward's bridge. "Captain, multiple vessels in the Valtian fleet are breaking formation. Their crews are reading the same data we are. I am detecting a spike in internal communications across their network." Jax let out a tense breath. "Mutiny. He's losing his own fleet." Grin, seeing his authority crumble, made a desperate move. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals lash out. "All ships fire on the relic," he screamed. "Destroy that machine, level it." But his commands were met with silence. On the bridges of the other Valtian ships, captains and crews looked at the evidence of their employers' crimes, at the years of skimmed profits and cut corners that had put their own lives at risk. They looked at the serene, ancient vessel that had fired no shots, launched no missiles, but had wielded truth like a scalpel. They did not fire. Only the gilded claw responded. Grin, seizing direct control, brought his own ship's primary weapons to bear. Massive energy cannons designed to crack asteroids began to glow with terrifying intensity. The machine teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Inside the reckoning, Vance watched the gilded claw's power levels surge. "It is preparing to fire," the ship's mind stated. "A lethal response is now justified under the doctrine of proportionality." "No," Vance said, again her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. "Our purpose is to establish the law, not to become executioners. There is another way. Show them the weight of their actions. Show them the full equation." The Judicator did not raise its shields. It did not power its weapons. Instead, it focused its immense computational power on the single unresolved case in its ledger, the destruction of the Dyson sphere. A wave of energy far more subtle than a weapon discharge emanated from its hull. It was not a beam, but a query. It swept through the debris field, through the shattered moon-sized fragments of the great sphere, reading the stress fractures in the crystal, tasting the faint, lingering radiation signatures, analyzing the vector of the ancient cataclysm. It was gathering evidence. On the screen, a simulation began to form. It showed the Dyson sphere as it had been, a perfect, gleaming shell around its star. Then it showed the weapon that had killed it. It was not a bomb. It was a resonance cascade, a wave of harmonic frequencies precisely tuned to shatter the crystalline structure of the sphere. It was an act of cosmic vandalism on an unimaginable scale. And then the reckoning did something that made Kalen gasp. It overlaid the energy signature of the ancient weapon with the live charging signature of the Gilded Claw's cannons. The patterns were a near-perfect match. Truth, when weaponized, is the cleanest blade. The Vaultian technology, their proprietary mining and cutting tools, was a direct descendant of the weapon that had destroyed this system. They were not just salvagers. They were the inheritors, knowing or not, of the original crime. The very tools Grin was about to use to attack the reckoning were a lesser echo of the tools that had committed the first great injustice in this place. The ancient voice broadcast this finding on all channels, its tone resonating with the finality of a gavel strike. The equation is balanced. The debt is identified. The Vaultian Compact holds the legacy of the crime. Grin's cannons fired. Two immense beams of pure energy, thick as star freighters, converged on the obsidian hull of the reckoning. The moment was silent and absolute. The beams struck, and they vanished. Not blocked by a shield, but absorbed. The black hull seemed to drink the energy, the glowing sigil on its prow flaring for a moment, with incandescent brilliance. The ship took the full, furious power of the assault and converted it, storing it within its ancient capacitors. It had turned an act of aggression into a source of power. It had mirrored the attack not by returning it, but by consuming it. The cost of anger is often paid by the angry. The Gilded Claw's weapon systems flickered and died, drained by the massive discharge. Warning klaxons blared across its bridge. Grin stared in disbelief, his one desperate act of violence rendered impotent, literally used to refuel his enemy. And then the reckoning acted, not with a lance of gravity or a phase torpedo. It deployed a single shimmering field of energy that enveloped the Gilded Claw. It wasn't a tractor beam. It was a containment field, a perfect, inescapable cage of hard light. Then, with methodical precision, it used pinpoint gravitic manipulators, the same technology it might use to assemble a delicate instrument, to reach into the Gilded Claw's engine room and gently remove its power core, placing it in a stable, decaying orbit a few thousand kilometers away. The Gilded Claw went dark and silent, a dead hulk adrift in the void. The battle, if it could be called that, was over. The Judicator had defeated a capital-class salvage vessel without causing a single casualty, without scratching its own paint. It had won through superior logic, superior law, and when finally pressed, superior non-lethal force. A system of law requires a tangible foundation. A priority communique flashed on the steward's bridge. It was from Concordance High Command. An admiral, his face a stern, chiseled mask of authority, appeared on the screen. His eyes were wide with a disbelief that bordered on fear. He had been monitoring the entire exchange. "Captain Vance," he began, his voice strained. "Report." What in the stars is that thing?" Vance, still within the Judicator's great chamber, answered the call. "Admiral, it is precisely what my report stated. It is the reckoning. It is a living embodiment of the Concordance's highest legal principles, and it is now an active agent of our government." The Admiral was silent for a long moment, processing the impossible events. The fraud uncovered. The mutiny. The effortless neutralization of a hostile threat. He looked at the data streaming from the tessellation, evidence of a crime 10 millennia old. He looked at the silent, caged Gilded Claw. The evidence was irrefutable. "Your deputization is unorthodox, Captain," he finally said, the understatement hanging in the air. "But effective. High Command is dispatching the Third Fleet to secure the system and take the Vaultian crews into custody. They will arrive in 72 hours. Until then, you are in command. Maintain the peace." The Admiral's image faded, leaving Vance standing in the heart of her newfound authority. Some victories are measured not in what is destroyed, but in what is preserved. In the aftermath, a quiet efficiency descended upon the system. The remaining Valtian ships, their captains now fully cooperating, helped secure the disabled Gilded Claw and began transmitting their own internal records as evidence for the coming inquiry. The steward sustained a minor hull scorch from the dissipated plasma, shot a cosmetic scar that Jax insisted on logging with grim satisfaction. A tangible cost, however small. Inside the Reckoning, the massive energy reserves it had absorbed from Grin's attack caused its primary arrays to glow with a faint blue heat. The internal temperature of the chamber rose by a single perfectly controlled degree before cooling systems silent for ages engaged with a soft hum. A cost of effort. Kalen was in a scholar's paradise interfacing with the Judicator's archives. "Captain, the scope of this is monumental," he said, his voice hushed with reverence. "This ship's ledger contains rulings on disputes spanning 1,000 star systems from before the Concordance was even a dream. It's a complete history of our legal evolution. This isn't just a ship, it's the bedrock of our civilization." Vance walked to the central console, looking at the star map of the tessellation. The investigation was just beginning. The trail of the crime was ancient, but the reckoning was patient. It would uncover the truth no matter how long it took. The ghost of the tessellation would finally have its day in court. She had come here to protect a relic, a piece of the past. Instead, she had awakened the future. A future where the law was not just a set of rules, but a living, thinking, and acting force among the stars. The responsibility was terrifying and exhilarating. She was no longer just a captain. She was a steward of the ultimate precedent. She looked at the central display. The ledger entry for Grin's consortium was now closed, marked with a single elegant symbol that meant balanced. Below it, the entry for the Sol Tessera system still glowed, its status updated from dormant to active. The work was not over. The work was just beginning. A great silence can hold the greatest promise. "I came to this graveyard of stars to protect a memory. I thought my duty was to the past, to shield a piece of our history from the greed of the present. I was wrong. The law is not a monument to be guarded. It is a tool to be wielded." The reckoning slept not because it was broken, but because it was waiting for someone to remember that justice is not a passive state. It is an active verb. It is a calculation that must be performed, a ledger that must be kept, a verdict that must be rendered. We are the keepers of that great and terrible account, and the silence of 10,000 years has finally been broken. The debt will be paid.